What's going on, guys? TowerNumberNine here, and I am excited to bring you 3 exclusive preview cards from Fantasy Flight Games. Big shout out to FFG for sending these over. I know people don't like long intros for these, so let's get right to the cards. First up, we have Nimble Prowess. This is a 1-cost Vigilance upgrade that gives +1/+1. Attached to a friendly unit, when played, you may exhaust a unit in attached unit's arena. So this is really good value. 1 cost for an exhaust is better than what we're often seeing, and you get this permanent stat buff. But it's worth noting that because the exhaust is limited to a unit in the same arena as yours, that does impose some targeting restrictions, and it makes it less flexible than a lot of other exhaust cards that aren't dependent on you having a unit in the same arena as the opponent. One example would be you sometimes see these like space versus ground races, where both players are playing relatively aggressively and just trying to take out the opponent's base, one player in the space arena and one player in the ground arena. In that sort of situation, a card like No Good to Me Dead can be very effective to exhaust your opponent's best unit, but Nimble Prowess here isn't necessarily going to be that strong because it only exhausts an enemy unit in the same arena as the unit you attach it to. So if all your stuff is on the ground and your opponent's threatening you in space, you won't be able to use this to exhaust one of their cards. However, it is worth noting that because those stats stick around for a long-term benefit, that really is a lot of value. Um, Additionally, the vigilance aspect hasn't had as much exhaust tech. Most of that has been in cunning, so it allows you to potentially have some exhausts in decks that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be able to run that as much. I think it's really quite a solid card overall, but it is worth noting that it won't necessarily be all that good for hard control decks, simply because they often don't have very many units. So you might see this and think, oh, now my like Iden double blue or whatever is going to be able to have exhaust tech in addition to the removal that it's already playing. But because those decks don't reliably have units on the board, maybe you have Dr. Pershing or something. Maybe you even have like Inferno 4 in space and you can play this on it. But the fact that you have to have that unit in the same arena as the unit that you want to exhaust is going to make it less strong for decks that aren't as focused on units. However, overall, I think this is quite a strong card because it's relatively cheap for an exhaust and it also gives you a nice buff. Next up, we have Aggressive Negotiations. This is an interesting one. It's a 3-cost attack pump event in the aggression aspect. Attack with a unit. For this attack, it gets +1 power for each card in your hand. This one is interesting to me because the upside is potentially very, very high, but depending on how many cards you have in hand, this could be underwhelming. I believe that the card does not count itself because it is out of hand after you have played it. So if you have 4 cards in your hand, including this one, and you play it, you now have 3 cards in hand and it gives you +3, basically ending up as a surprise strike that costs 1 more. Now, surprise strike's a really good card, and I think there are some decks that would want to play a surprise strike that costs 1 more, especially if they don't have the cunning aspect. However, for aggressive negotiations to be really efficient, I think you want to have more cards in hand. You really want to have 4 or more other cards in hand so that you get more than the +3 that surprise strike would give you. And as a result, I think this is going to work best with decks that tend to accumulate cards, either via card draw effects or card decks that are using Smuggle, maybe the new plot mechanic, because those mechanics that allow you to play cards from resources and then replace them are essentially allowing you to not reduce the number of cards that you have in hand while still playing things. I think I think it'll be interesting to see where this one ends up. The upside is potentially very, very high, but that is reliant on you building up card advantage. I think that one area where it might be good is a way for a blue-red hard control deck to turn the corner. Because in those decks you often accumulate quite a lot of cards, and this can start really putting pressure on quickly. It might synergize well with the new Dedra Miro, who has the ability that potentially draws you cards on her leader side. I recently recorded a deck tech with both an aggro and control version of Dedra Miro, which you can check out on my channel if you're interested. I've been testing a bit with her before the set's release, and I'm very excited about that. But one other synergy that I want to highlight is the new Dryden Voss I Get All Worked Up. So Dryden is a 4-cost aggression villainy ground unit that's a 2/5, bad stat line, but on attack he can double his power for an attack. If you do, he doesn't ready during the next regroup phase. And you might wonder why that's good, but this doubling occurs after buffs. So if you play aggressive negotiations, I believe, let's say that you have 5 total cards in hand after playing aggressive negotiations, and you're giving him +5. So now he's 7, but then you double that and he swings for 14. So that is potentially an incredibly powerful buff for Dryden and something to watch out for as a way to do really a ton of damage in just one action. Okay, now we're going to move on. Last but not least, Ziton Moj, Black Sun Bully. My apologies if I mispronounced that character's name. I did not recognize him. But Ziton is a 4-cost 4/5. When you take the initiative, deal 2 damage to a base. He has the Underworld trait, and he has an aggression unit that is neither vigilance or he is neither heroism nor villainy. So this is a really interesting card for aggro decks. The stats are on curve for the cost. You know, you're normally looking at 9 points of stats at the 4-cost price point for a ground unit. And the ability to inflict damage to a base when you take the initiative is really threatening in some circumstances. So in particular, you know, you might see people being like, oh man, you know, they play this guy. 4/5 is not the easiest stat line for opponents to deal with necessarily. If you play this guy on the field and then take the initiative afterwards, he immediately does 2 damage, and then if they can't deal with him, he's going to be able to swing for 4 more damage potentially. It can be a big threat for opponents. So they may try to take initiative early to avoid this, but that in turn means that they're not fully playing out their turn, and may not be slowing you down as much as they could otherwise. And this can really start putting people in check once their base gets low enough. So let's say that your opponent only has 2 HP left. You play Ziton Moj. Now they have to immediately kill him or take the initiative themselves, or you take the initiative and win next action. Or, you know, maybe they heal or something. But, you know, if you think about other effects, suddenly the point at which they're sort of in check might become closer. So there are things where, you know, if you play Ziton Moj, the opponent has 3 HP left, but you have Sabine's leader to potentially ping. That is still going to be something that's really threatening. And the fact that this ability is not based on attacks means that there's this element of being in check even if they have good defenses otherwise. So if you play Ziton Moj and the opponent has a sentinel on the ground and isn't worried about him actually attacking their base, they still have to worry about this ability damaging them, which I think is really cool. And so this works for both heroism and villainy decks. I think that he's going to be something that I'm very interested to test in aggro builds, whether that be like the aggro Dedra that I was mentioning earlier, a classic Sabine Wren, or what. The Underworld trait here might be somewhat relevant. You know, if you're playing this guy in Cad Bane, for instance, you do get that ping, but probably not as strong as if you had like the Rebel trait or the Force trait, something like that. Overall, though, I think Ziton is a very interesting card for aggressive decks, and I'm going to be excited to see how he works out in testing. So here is all 3 of the, here is a slide with all 3 of the previews again. We have the Nimble Prowess, that cheap vigilance upgrade that's potentially going to allow you to exhaust an opposing unit. Aggressive negotiations for an attack pump that can potentially hit really hard if you have a lot of cards in hand. And Ziton Moj, Black Sun Bully, a unit that seems quite threatening for aggro players, allowing them to do damage just by taking the initiative. Those are the cards that FFG sent over for me to preview for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in and checking out the channel. I have more stuff on the way. Check out that Dedra video if you're interested in seeing some stuff about one of the new leaders that I'm especially excited about for this set. But yeah, that's going to about do it for this one, guys. What do you think about these cards? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I'm TowerNumber9. I will catch you guys later.